In the city of Turin, Italy, a cloth of about 14.6 by 3.5 feet, which is like 4.4 meters by 1.1 meters, is kept in St. John the Baptist Cathedral since 1578. It is claimed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that was left in the tomb after his resurrection. The Shroud of Turin. Before that, it had other names because it wasn't in Turin yet. It is claimed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that was left in the tomb after his resurrection. If you are familiar with the story, you know that he left. There were some clothes in the grave. Millions upon millions have gone to see it in person. Now, on this cloth there is an image of a real human. Could it be a real photograph of Jesus at the moment of his resurrection? That's the intriguing question. Okay, so two main aspects to keep in mind as we discuss this. We are going to ask questions about the cloth itself as well as the image on it. How old is the cloth? Has it been dated scientifically? Any clues about its origins? Is it traceable to the beginning of Christianity, or is it something that came up in the Middle Ages? And then the image of it. Is it a work of an artist? Who did it? Nobody has named any names. When? Some people say, oh, it's in the Middle Ages. Why? Perhaps to fool people and make money when they come to see it, or maybe just a pious act of devotion to remember the sufferings of Christ. But more importantly, the question is, how did that image form? Because it seems no one has been able to replicate it so far, the way it really is. All the characteristics of the image have not been replicated so far. So that's what we have to keep in mind as we go through this. Are there other reasonable suggestions how the image formed? Are you open-minded if those suggestions include the supernatural? Or are you biased against the supernatural? These are questions that we must keep in mind as we study this cloth. The official photographer of this project, Barry Schwartz, this guy is still a non-messianic Jew, which means he's a Jew that doesn't believe in Christ, in Jesus as the Christ, as the Messiah. After 17 years of study from 1978 in this project, he has accepted the genuineness of the shroud without becoming a Christian. So my point is, you can still become a shroud believer without necessarily becoming a Christian. We're talking about a cloth that is in Turin right now, and what is it about, and what's the image about? In the words of the shroud researcher John Walsh, the Shroud of Turin is either the most awesome and instructive relic of Jesus Christ in existence, or it is one of the most ingenious, most unbelievably clever products of the human mind and hand on record. It is one or the other. There's no middle ground. Donald Lynn was also a member of the STERP team that studied the shroud in 1978. In considering the incredibly difficult task of artistically creating the shroud image, he concluded, it would be miraculous if it were a forgery. I want to talk about the fact that it's a unique artifact. It's a negative photograph with 3D quality. I will explain that. It has a form of an actual human, severely tortured and crucified, exactly like it was said about Jesus. There is another cloth. It's called Sudarium of Oviedo. Oviedo is a city in Spain. It complements this shroud. It's like a face cloth or like a handkerchief that is believed to be the cloth, the separate head cloth that was put on his face. It complements the shroud. Two different cloths, two different cities, but it complements the shroud. There are references in history that trace it to the beginning, and geographical locators on the cloth that corroborates that history. Some experiments have authenticated the shroud. Archaeology supports it. It is beyond human ability to replicate it so far. There's lots of people that have tried to make the similar kind of image, but none has so far replicated it in all its characteristics. So that's something you have to deal with. Lab's 1998 carbon-14 dating is questionable. There was carbon dating that happened in 1988, sorry, not 98, 1988. 3 different labs. They came up with a date to say the shroud originated in the Middle Ages, around 1290 AD. But those results are questionable, so we'll talk about that also. Lastly, and importantly, Easter faith does not depend on the shroud. So, like I said, you can be a Christian and don't believe in the shroud. Your belief in the resurrection does not depend on the shroud. In the city of Turin, Italy, a cloth of about 14.6 by 3.5 feet, which is like 4.4 meters by 1.1 meters, is kept in St. John the Baptist Cathedral since 1578. It is claimed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that was left in the tomb after his resurrection. The Shroud of Turin. It's a unique fact, most studied item from history, probably more than the Rosetta Stone, the cuneiform tablets. I think it is on the level if there was an inscription on the moon. Imagine they went to the moon 1969 and they found an inscription there. The kind of debate that would have generated from that inscription, I think, is almost on the same level as what the shroud has generated. It involves a lot of fields of study: chemistry, physics, forensic medicine. It has survived fires, edicts to burn Christian items, wars, floods. Even Adolf Hitler attempted to take it, and they had to hide it. Even dismissals, simple dismissals, this is nonsense. You know, it has survived all those kind of biased dismissals. It's unique because it unites and divides at the same time. We have Christians and non-Christians on both sides. Not a big surprise, this is the case because of the history of relics and icons. But we have Christians and non-Christians who believe it is real, authentic. At the same time, we have Christians and non-Christians who say it's all bunk, it's nonsense. So it unites and divides at the same time. I think that's unique. The only image-defying explanations, I don't know if there's any other image in the world today that has caused heated and sometimes hostile controversy about how it was created, how it was formed. If you can think of any image right now that has caused as much controversy as the shroud, then I stand to be corrected. It's a negative photograph with 3D quality. In 1898, after photograph has been invented, Secondo Pia, a lawyer and an amateur photographer, was allowed to photograph the shroud when it was being displayed. He discovered that the image in the cloth was a negative, as if the cloth was a film. His negative, as he developed it, was an actual positive. So when he was picking up the glass, developing the negative of what he took, this is what he saw, and he almost dropped it. And when that was published, it aroused attention. He was accused of errors, but he was accused of many, many things. 33 years later, in 1931, a professional photographer, I don't know how you say his name, Henry, collaborated Pierre's findings. Finally, validation came to Pierre in his 70s, and he reportedly breathed a deep sigh of relief when he saw Henry's photograph, confirming that it is a negative, an actual negative, as if the cloth is some kind of fern. In 1975, Air Force scientists John Jackson and Eric Jumper, using a VP8 image analyzer designed for military use, they want to analyze photos, I guess spy photos, so that they can tell the topography of wherever they're taking. Some say it can also be used in space programs to tell the planets how the heights and all these things are happening. They discovered that it has got 3D data in the image. Unlike any other picture, if you put just a normal picture, it does not come like that. That actual photograph is coming from the VP8 image, and it had normal flow, normal form of a human being, unlike any other image. This was the last straw for these scientists, and then they wrote officially to seek permission to study the cloth. So they wrote a 75-page application to the owner of the shroud. At this time, it was King of Italy, King Umberto. Sometimes we think it belongs to the Catholic Church. It does not. It belongs to the living Pope. This King of Umberto, he willed it to the living Pope. Whoever is the Pope at that time owns the shroud, not the church, not anybody else. So it's now in the hands of the Pope, but all along it was never a church property. About 40 scientists gathered from different fields to study this. They took 2 years to prepare meetings of how exactly they're going to study this, to make sure that they don't destroy it. And when they were given 5 days, they used all the 24 hours to examine it. And it took 3 years to analyze all that data. Then they published in peer-reviewed journals later on. This was called the Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP. Their work remains the basis for all investigations to date. Nobody else has had the same chance. So they went to Rome to settle one question: how was the image created? In the city of Turin, Italy, a cloth of about 14.6 by 3.5 feet, which is like 4.4 meters by 1.1 meters, is kept in St. John the Baptist Cathedral since 1578. It is claimed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that was left in the tomb after his resurrection. The Shroud of Turin. They went to Rome to settle one question: how was the image created? This is how they concluded the question. No pigments, paints, dyes, or stains have been found on the fibrils. X-ray, fluorescence, and microchemistry on the fibrils preclude the possibility of paint being used as a method for creating the image. Ultraviolet and infrared evaluation confirm these studies. Computer image enhancement and analysis by a device known as a VP8 image analyzer show that the image has unique three-dimensional information encoded in it. It is clear that there has been a direct contact of the shroud with the body, which explains certain features, such as scourge marks as well as the blood. For an adequate explanation for the image of the shroud, one must have an explanation which is scientifically sound from a physical, chemical, biological, and medical viewpoint. At the present, this type of solution does not appear to be obtainable by the best efforts of the members of the SHROUD team. Thus, the answer to the question of how the image was produced or what produced the image remains now, as it has in the past, a mystery. We can conclude for now that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin and also give a positive test for serum albumin. The image is an ongoing mystery, and until further chemical studies are made, perhaps by this group of scientists or perhaps by some scientists in the future, the problem remains unsolved. This was their conclusion. It is a form of an actual human being who has been tortured and crucified with wounds that match exactly the wounds described about Jesus in the Gospels. Professor Delage, I don't know if that's how they say it, professor of zoology, comparative anatomy in Paris, an agnostic, not a believer, he declared it a bundle of imposing probabilities. He says 1 in 10 billion that that person is not Jesus Christ. 1 in 10 billion if that person in the shroud is not Jesus Christ. That is an unbeliever stating this. He concluded that the shroud figure was indeed Christ. His assistant, Vinon, declared the shroud's identification to be as sure as a photograph or set of fingerprints. In 1950, Dr. Pierre Babet, prominent French surgeon, after 15 years of study, said the body in the image was anatomically perfect in its physiology and pathology. So it's a real human being. It's not an artist's production. It's a real human being. And all theories must say some kind of body was involved in producing this image. The wounds, some have counted 370 wounds and injuries, match those described in the Gospel for Jesus with extra graphics and gore. The man was naked. You know, all the art that we are used to, they always make sure there's a loincloth. But the truth is, the man in the shroud was naked. Blood stains on the head compatible with the crown, more accurately, cap of thorns, like a helmet of thorns. Blood remained red because of bilirubin, only found in torture victims. Over 120 scourge marks, compatible with Roman flagrum, all over the body, not just the back. Nail wounds in the wrists, which is more anatomically correct to hold the weight of the body than the palm of the hand. Most of the pictures, we have the nails in the palm. But this shroud shows that the nail went through the wrist. Nail wound in the feet. The man's feet were on top of each other. Legs are pulled up due to rigor mortis, the signs of death, stiffness. Blood is sourced from actual wounds, showing evidence of gravity from a vertical position. The way the blood stains are on the cloth, it's as if this person was in a vertical position and the blood was flowing according to gravity, flowing down. So that's the way the blood stains appear. No stains of body decomposition. It means maybe the body disappeared from the cloth before it started decomposing. Wound in the side, compatible in size with a Roman spear tip. Postmortem blood flow from the side wound also flows across the back. Legs of the man were not broken. The swollen face, broken nose, possibly from falling, because they also found dirt on the nose area that can only be linked to Jerusalem kind of soil. We'll come back to that. The signs that the beard was pulled out, swollen stomach, possibly from asphyxiation, because the cross was punishment about breathing. You will struggle breathing when you're on the cross, and that's how you suffered and died. Bruised knees, possibly from falling. O is for Oviedo's Sudarium, complements the shroud. It's got the same rare AB blood type as the shroud, the same kind of pollen grains, same kind of dust particles, and its history goes back to at least 614 AD, the Sudarium. So it complements the shroud. That's a whole volume on its own. In the city of Turin, Italy, a cloth of about 14.6 by 3.5 feet, which is like 4.4 meters by 1.1 meters, is kept in St. John the Baptist Cathedral since 1578. It is claimed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that was left in the tomb after his resurrection. The Shroud of Turin. References in history trace it to the beginning. Let's go to R. References in history trace it to the beginning. There's lots and lots and lots of references. You can't get to all of them. But there's a story of King Abgar that invited Jesus, but because Jesus was murdered, the story says his apostle Thaddeus went with a cloth that had the face of Jesus. It says it was known as the Mandilion or cloth of Edessa, which is Turkey, where Abgar was. It was dubbed the image not made with human hands. And then it was discovered in a war in 525 after it was hidden for over 400 years. Geographical locators on the cloth corroborates the history. This well-known Swiss criminologist Max Frey, who solved a lot of crimes by using pollen found on the cloth or found on items related to crime scenes, he went and applied this sticky tape on the cloth and then studied the pollen samples that he found on that. And he found 22 pollen species unique to Turkey, and other 7 only found in Israel. That corroborates that the shroud had been to Turkey, had been to Israel. In 1997, Danim, an Israel botanist and professor at Hebrew University, confirmed flower images and 28 different pollen and plants images on the shroud. 10 of the plants only bloom March, April, around Easter. In 2004, a textile expert, Fleur Lemberg, revealed that the stitching of a seam on the shroud that runs the entire length, known as the side strip, is typical of Jewish burial shrouds found in the ancient fortress of Masada in southern Israel. She verifies the shroud has the style of textile used in 1st century Israel. So all these are collaborating the shroud history going back to the 1st century. You know, the shroud, when you measure it, in Syrian cubits, is exactly 8 by 2 cubits. While in feet, our modern ways of measuring is 14 feet, 0.6 inches, or in meters is 4.1. So there are all these fractions when we use our modern measurements, but in Syrian cubits where the shroud could have come from, it's exactly 8 by 2, which lends credibility to the fact that it goes back that long. Digital imaging has revealed images of coins on the eyes called leptons, minted during the time of Pontius Pilate. They see this lepton, which was common to put coins on the eyes corpses. But if it is true, then this one was only minted the 3 years that Pontius Pilate was governor, nowhere else. If it is true, it just leads us back to that time. Two scientists, Joseph Kobeck and Richard Levi-Setti, researched the dirt found on the shroud. They found what they call travertine aragonite around the nose and left kneecap and the heels. And they state that there might be other places in the world where identical travertine aragonite is found. However, no such places are known. They only know that kind of rock to be found in Israel, in Jerusalem, around the tomb area. Experiments have authenticated the shroud. There are many, many experiments. I can't really list all of them. Some of them I alluded to. Many experiments to determine the age of the cloth have been done. Most of them say the shroud goes back to the 1st century. Other experiments have proven the image is not a painting. Like I said, the team in 1978 did all kinds of experiments using light, using all kinds of things to prove that it's not a painting. Some experiments support the authenticity that there's human blood, A-B type, which is rare, and then the accuracy of depiction of nail-pierced wrists, not palms. So if the shroud originated in the Middle Ages, you expect an artist to draw the nails in the palms, not in the wrists, because nobody at that point really knew exactly where the nails went. Archaeology supports it. The Roman flagrum, the whip, has been found, and it matches exactly the wounds you see on the shroud. The Roman spear has also been dug and found, and the one that has been found, the spear head, matches the spear wound on the cloth, even in dimensions. The crucifixion details are on point. The type of stitch of the cloth, like I said, is exactly like those unearthed at Masada. Masada is a city that was destroyed in around 70 AD, Jewish city. In the city of Turin, Italy, a cloth of about 14.6 by 3.5 feet, which is like 4.4 meters by 1.1 meters, is kept in St. John the Baptist Cathedral since 1578. It is claimed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that was left in the tomb after his resurrection. The Shroud of Turin. I believe this shroud is beyond human ability. So far, no one has really replicated it. The image was caused by the body, not by hands of an artist. It refers to the fact that the image is not deep into the cloth's superficiality. I think I missed something there. The fabric is only dented by the image, equivalent to 2/10 of the thickness of human hairs. And then think of the width of your hair, not the length, but the width. Cut it into 10 parts. Only those 2 parts. That's how deep the image goes into the cloth. Nobody can paint like that. If you just one brush stroke, you know, it will soak through to the other side, to the back side of the cloth. It's uniform in its intensity. That's impossible for an artist to make sure that it's all the same depth. You know, somewhere it will be more paint than other places, more touch than other places, but this is uniform in its intensity. There's no direction of brush strokes, no difference in depth, no edges of the image like an artist would have. There's no sign of decay, as if the corpse disappeared from the cloth, leaving no smudges. If somebody was trying to remove the body, there would have been smudges left of the blood or anything like that. No smudges, it's just clean. So that's one more issue to deal with. In March 2019, an attempt to reproduce happened. They stated, the perfect reproduction of the Turin shroud remains a challenge since many other characteristics of the original image have not yet been obtained with any of the processes used for reproduction to date. In 2011, a report of similar experiments covering 5 years was released. A team of researchers from the National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development, ENEA, in Italy carried those experiments over a period of 5 years. In the words of D. Lazzaro, leading those experiments, he told National Geographic that UV light necessary to produce that kind of image on a cloth superficially exceeds the maximum power released by all ultraviolet light sources available today. What is needed is bursts of such kind of light, several billion watts, in 1/40 billionth of a second. So it's really in a flash that you can create such kind of image on a cloth superficially. These are experiments that people have been doing, and there's no one really disputing those. So reasons why Middle Ages artists, medieval artists could not have produced the image. We said he could not have created an image of a naked Christ. That would be too sacrilegious. He wouldn't have placed serum rings around the blood dots on the scourge marks of the shroud. These serum rings are only visible under UV light, and so it's only us in this day and age that are able to know what else is on the shroud. The people back there didn't even know there's those things there. An artist in the Middle Ages would not have added pollen on the shroud. That is unique to the Jerusalem area, or added pollen around the head that is from a plant with long thorns. An artist in the Middle Ages would not have put microscopic amount of dirt in abrasions on the tip of the nose and on the knee. You know, as if he knew, okay, let's put some dirt to show that he fell with his nose. Because obviously, if it's true about Christ, if he was falling 3 times, definitely, if he fell forward, he had no hands to touch the ground before he hit the face. He was carrying something else. So he probably went straight and broke the nose like the shroud shows. And the knee also has got the same kind of dirt only found in Jerusalem. The artist would not have put bilirubin into the blood to know that, okay, we need to make sure the blood that we paint with is from a tortured victim. I don't think he would be thinking like that. A medieval artist would not have put nanoparticles of creatinine bound to ferritin onto fibers of the shroud. I cannot pretend I know this, but that's what it is. Those small particles, microscopic, indicate that the person wrapped in the shroud had been heavily tortured. Small signs of torture. A Middle Ages artist, he wouldn't have put microscopic chips of travertine, aragonite, limestone, that's found in Israel, containing impurities that closely match limestone in Jerusalem. He would not have known anything about this unique stitch discovered at Masada. I mean, in the Middle Ages, you should be trying to copy what they used to do in Masada when nobody else knows what Masada is. It's buried at this time, waiting for archaeology to unearth things there. So, an artist wouldn't have done this. He wouldn't have created a negative image with 3D characteristics, like I went over. In the city of Turin, Italy, a cloth of about 14.6 by 3.5 feet, which is like 4.4 meters by 1.1 meters, is kept in St. John the Baptist Cathedral since 1578. It is claimed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that was left in the tomb after his resurrection. The Shroud of Turin. So, is it really from the Middle Ages? Well, the labs in 1988, they dated the shroud and declared that the shroud was a fake produced in the Middle Ages between 2090 to 1345, thereabout. So they declared so certainly that it's a fake. Here are the facts of the case. They took a sample of the shroud from the worst possible sample area that's agreed by everyone. They took like from the bottom, the edge, where people used to hoard the shroud when they display it. Protocols were broken how to take this test. They had agreed to 7 steps, but they broke all of those protocols. That's details that I can't go into. They presented it to then Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict. They presented the proposal and he okayed it to test the shroud. Sooner or later, Ratzinger was overruled, but they decided to do other ways. And I believe there was a bit of arrogance the way they announced the results. There was a lot of arrogance with the exclamation mark, the shroud is a fake, with the photo posed. I think I didn't pull up that photo. There was a bit of arrogance. Instead of just saying, our results show this, we may be right, may be wrong. Science shouldn't be that certain, but they were very certain. There was a bit of arrogance scientifically. The method itself was questionable. It was not yet matured. Even the inventor of the method of carbon-14 dating, he said, that's the worst possible sample. These results should not be considered valid. The one who invented the method himself commented on this, and he wasn't happy with the way it was done. Raymond Regis, that's the guy in the photo, he conclusively demonstrated that the samples used for the original radiocarbon tests were taken from a rewoven area of the shroud and therefore do not represent the original fabric. So the 1988 shroud dating tests and results have been completely discredited. Rogers' work was independently corroborated by others like John Brown, principal research scientist from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Some of the reasons for an earlier date other than the one the carbon-14 method suggests, the Hungarian prayer codex that I talked about, that comes 65 years before the date the scientists pronounced, shows that somebody had seen the shroud. It has the same image with hands crossed, no thumbs, and the burn hose. I wish I had somewhere to point with. The burn hose in an L shape that you find on the shroud, and the pattern of the weave of the shroud, which I didn't talk about. The textile experts call it the herringbone weave. It's only unique to 1st century. All that shows that this thing existed before the date the scientists claim it was it originated. Let's keep going with the summaries. The spinning wheel was invented in Asia in the 11th century. So the shroud was not made by any spinning wheel, it was made by hand spun thread. So the threads of the shroud were probably spun before the spinning wheel arrived in Israel about the 12th century. So it goes back at least before the date the scientists pronounced, because it's handmade. The shroud's dimensions suggest Syrian cubit, which is not Middle Ages but ancient times, like I said earlier, 8 by 2 cubits. Ancient coins that contain the same image as the Shroud of Turin go back to about 675 AD, and 188 points of similarity in those coins, some of those coins with the shroud face image. The Sudarium of Oviedo dates back to at least 570 AD in Jerusalem. I talked about this in the city of Oviedo in Spain. It left Palestine in 614 and arrived in Spain a few years later. It went to northern Spain in 718 and was taken to Oviedo in 840, where it has remained ever since. So it goes back to at least 840. If it is a companion cloth for the shroud, then the shroud goes back at least to 840, which is hundreds of years before the dates pronounced by the scientists of the 1988 carbon dating. In the city of Turin, Italy, cloth of about 14.6 by 3.5 feet, which is like 4.4 meters by 1.1 meters, is kept in St. John the Baptist Cathedral since 1578. It is claimed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus that was left in the tomb after his resurrection. The Shroud of Turin. So, my last point, which I already said, Christianity did not begin because of the shroud, neither is it under threat without it. Christianity began because of the belief in the resurrection of Christ. So, belief originated because of an actual shroud. Without the actual resurrection, the belief would not have risen. That's my argument. And without the belief, Christianity would not have begun. So the A led to the B, which led to the C. If we have C today, Christianity, we had the belief and we had to have A first. Christianity is primarily not activism, love your neighbor, do justice, social justice and all these things which are good. But that's not what is Christianity primarily. Primarily it is history, witnessed, the historical fact that somebody died and rose again. That's the claim that has built Christianity. Without that claim, forget Christianity. You have a right to your opinion about everything else. Relax and have an open mind studying this. Easier for us believers to do than for non-believers, I believe, who rule out the resurrection based on their secular, I'll call it doctrines, they wouldn't love that word, or other biases. You can't be open-minded if you have already ruled out the resurrection as a possible explanation of the image. Like I said, there are many theories that a radiation event of some kind was involved, the body radiating something, maybe heat, maybe light, and it caused the image in the cloth. Those are the more plausible explanations. But if it's a radiation event, then we should be open-minded. Maybe it was a flash of light in a resurrection episode, which left this image in the cloth. It is not an unreasonable conclusion. It is very reasonable because as we speak, no one has really come up with an explanation how the image was formed. Many have attempted, but they don't produce all the characteristics of the image.